So the title of the talk tonight was Not for Comfort. And the question is about what is meditation for? What is mindfulness meditation for? And is it about feeling more comfortable or feeling calm, which is often what you hear about what people want out of practice. Now, it's certainly true that what people want is a break from the troubles of the world, the way that they get so upset by things, either in their own past, in their own projections about the future, or the actual trouble. There's plenty of trouble in the world to pay attention to if you even have the time. It's hard to keep track of it, how much trouble there is. So there's a way that people can feel dominated by these kinds of negative experiences and just want to break from it, some way of just being able to be free from it for a while, even if it's only for a while. And it's certainly true that would make you more comfortable, and that kind of calm certainly has its value. It's the right direction. But there's a larger question around, do I really know what calm is? If I have an idea about what calm means, maybe if I try hard I'll get it, but maybe that's not even what I want. For some people, calm involves a sense of dullness, non-reactivity, kind of nothing matters, Even though you don't want it to be that way, sometimes that's how it can be. People can try to regulate themselves and keep themselves calm by being actually depressed, where they're less influenced, less affected by things, and have just sort of a more general suppressed experience. That's not desirable either. And comfort is an even harder one because, for some people, comfort is a big new box of Oreos and a gallon of milk, and they get comfortable and get to be 700 pounds. And we all have our ways of trying to avoid the momentary present discomfort that can lead to a lot of maneuvering and lead to a lot of bad situations, So just seeking to move toward the things that are good and away from the things that are bad in terms of what I'm thinking of right this minute, of what good and bad is usually not a very good guide for health, mental health, or, a more abiding sense of being okay. In a fundamental way, from a psychological point of view, people can have an idea of themselves that they feel that needs to be supported. It needs to be supported somehow, and they try to arrange their life and find the people and talk to themselves to support a view of themselves that may actually be quite fictitious and not really accurate. But it seems like that's what's needed, and so they will devote themselves in that way. And sometimes when people meditate, they just want to be able to do that more efficiently. They want to be able to get what they want and have it be lasting, and that's the goal. Even though that may be a completely inaccurate and uncomfortable situation, and people don't know better than to want it. So goal-oriented practices are always questionable, because you always have to wonder who's setting the goal, who has the right idea about what the goal should be. The whole premise of this, from a Buddhist point of view, is that I'm in a state of relative ignorance and confusion. And that's not news to me. I knew that was true when I was even young. It was clear to me when I was growing up that the adults sort of acted like they knew what was going on, but it was clear that they didn't. And they did things that were good and they did things that were bad, and they didn't seem to know the difference or be able to even correct themselves. And The same was true about me and my companions of the same age. Everybody was, there was a wildness in life that seemed to not match the simple ideas about good and bad and healthy and unhealthy. That the ideas didn't seem to matter much because there was this wildness going on and this lack of control around what to do, how to be able to do the thing that actually comes from a place of being healthy and being stable. From a practical point of view, getting a break from all of these things makes sense because spending time this way is not efficient, it's wasteful, it's stressful. Time is ticking. You don't get any of these minutes back, you know. And I'm sorry to let you know, we're going to be here for another 20 minutes, and you're never going to get those back. This is it. These are the 20 minutes, and you've chosen to spend them here. So that kind of reality about time can be a bit elusive. Sometimes we can feel a little unstuck from time, as though the time wasn't really passing, you know, like it didn't really count. It wasn't necessary, it wasn't essential. And the other major problem about being driven, the way I described before, about being driven by the way importance sort of registers in our minds about events and about memories and thoughts, is that that kind of learned and not very accurate calibration around what's important and what's not actually shapes what we see. It determines our perceptions in a way that really we don't have any choice about. The simplest big explanation is someone who was born and raised in a very dangerous environment becomes very sensitized to danger and to other people and strangers and how they're looking, and are they looking at me funny, and what could possibly happen next. That person, as they grow up, often enough ends up with a life filled with danger and near misses because that's where their attention is going. Their attention is intensely evaluating the environment and also their own mental processes for signs of danger, signs of trouble. It's hard for that person to feel happy. It's hard for that person to get enough nourishment. And that way that our experience in our somewhat random world can lead to a very narrowed experience of the world. So it's really filtered by our expectations. It would be useful to be free from those expectations. And that's part of the conclusion of this path that we're talking about in a broad sense. To be free from the way that we have been conditioned to experience our life, the way that we see the thing that is many steps away from the vivid reality of it, but has to do with its importance to me, its significance, how it makes me feel, all of those other things that can intervene. Now, here's another part of the guided tour of like a user's manual of the brain. What allows these kinds of patterns and this conditioning to persist is that they largely operate beneath our awareness. They're automatic. They have become automated. And this is actually a very beneficial feature of the brain in terms of an evolutionary adaptive process. If you, for example, think about the first time you drove a car, when you were learning how to drive a car, it's like this, and I like here, I gotta look there, I gotta look there, I gotta look here sometimes, and I have to press on the things, and I have to make sure that I see everything. And the first day you're wondering, how am I gonna get all this to happen? This is exhausting, and I can't actually do it. It's not like possible to be putting my attention where it's supposed to be. There's too much choices, there are too many choices, too much to remember. But very quickly, what the brain does is take all of that and submerges it into the cerebellum, in the back of the brain. where it turns into an automated process of information processing, scanning the environment, operating the body, reactive, very well tuned, very finely tuned, beautifully done. And we're not aware of it at all. You know, you're talking on the phone, you're having an argument while all this is going on, you know. It's possible to bring it into awareness when something happens. The unexpected, the truck veers over, and then it becomes more into awareness and you become able to take over. But for the most part, we're just running in automated fashion. That is very valuable, obviously, in this kind of case. And even the simple thing, like learning how to walk, when you watch a baby take its first steps, it's very complicated, you know? And it looks like way too much for any kid to do. Like, how is this kid ever going to learn how to walk? Because it's all like, everything goes every which way. But then it just happens. It happens for all of us. Something to know is that our brains are very eager to turn any part of our experience that we can into an automated process. It wants to do it. It's tuned to do it. It wants to develop habits, and it wants to remove things from awareness so that they run automatically, and then we can devote our attention to other things, devote our awareness to other things. Now, we also know that there's plenty of habits we have that aren't any good, that don't work for us, and that are unhelpful. The more complicated ones are about where, for example, you are at a party or you've had an interaction with someone and you say, it happened again. I feel this way now. That didn't go well. How did this happen again? It's like I don't even know what happened about what I said, what they said, how I presented myself, what the content really happened. And I didn't feel like I had any choice either. It just sort of rolled. And then here I am again in this feeling of like, how did this happen where it didn't work? You know, it didn't work well. We have lots of those feelings of, how am I in this position again? How is it that I don't seem to have a choice about things? On the one hand, it's good to notice that this is really a sign of that your brain is functioning, because your experience is becoming automated. But it really, unfortunately for us as humans, given our, you know, evidently our level of evolution, it can run wild. That kind of living in an unaware way can really happen profoundly, so that plenty of things that have no business being automated become automated. And then we end up just rolling through things and don't know why, including addictions, including all kinds of behaviors and attitudes and ways of talking to myself and ways of trying to, what happens when things go wrong? What do I do? So, just as that, or when we were talking before, the ability to ascribe importance to things, to mental events, to memories, to things that have happened to us, can get a little wild and uncalibrated, where lots of things have this undeserved importance and captures our attention and keeps us there in a way that really we don't want it, but it still keeps us, and we don't seem to have a choice about it. This kind of habitual patterns in the way they roll can also just be outside of our awareness. We don't get a handle on it. So part of the way I understand the Buddhist teachings about meditation is that this is a way of disrupting all of those automated processes. It's a very skillful way of not arguing with them or wrestling them to the ground or demonstrating how they're not efficient and therefore they should be modified, but to actually disrupt them from the root so that the mind actually becomes free from this mechanical processing stream that otherwise just plays. Now, the good news is that most habits aren't necessarily very powerful. They just are beneath awareness. So you don't have an ability to even have them. You don't even know they're happening. When you are able to become aware of things, then they become sort of manageable. That tends to be the rule, even when things are very troublesome. So the practice we just did is one of the very powerful and basic methods, skillful means for disrupting these patterns. And what it involves is taking advantage of our voluntary ability to place our attention where we wish. And we place our attention on something that is not thinking. We place it on our sensations. The reason that is so skillful is that our sensations are fresh. They are new. They're always new. And they call this sometimes they call it the object of mindfulness, is where you place your attention. And in some ways it's true that the object of mindfulness is always the unknown. That's the real object of mindfulness, because our sensations are not predictable. They just play. We don't get to say what we're going to feel next. We don't get to feel the breath in advance. We don't get to orchestrate it. When we have an object of mindfulness, that's the sounds, which is another way of, you can use any sensation as an object of mindfulness. If for a second now, as I end this sentence, we just hear the sounds, that's a very useful teacher, because we have no control over those sounds. We don't get to pick, we don't get to hold them and keep them. It's brand new, it's fresh. And that experience, the ability to direct our attention so that we have that experience, is the thing that acts to disrupt the play of these automated processes, which depend upon a process that is not fresh, that is not new and unknown. It is a reworking, re-chewing over and over and over of the same kind of process, the same kind of thing. And it's, by its nature, conceptual. It has an idea of how things work, and then it sort of lives out that idea. That's how these habits play out. Now, in actual practice, comfort can be actually rather disrupted by this kind of practice. And particularly in my practice as a psychotherapist, I see people who are troubled, and they are looking for help because they're not just troubled in a routine kind of way, but they really feel like they're suffering, and they need some relief, and they don't know what to do, and they need help with it. For them, just like for everybody, some of the things that we do habitually are soothing behaviors and coping behaviors. How do we cope with our stresses and strains of our life? How do we soothe ourselves when we're feeling afraid, and we're feeling angry, or feeling sad? And these can also become habitual behaviors that aren't really accessible to us and play out, and develop into things like addictions, where soothing and coping becomes heroin, or a kind of compulsive activity, shopping, which is surprisingly powerful. And, easier and easier to do now. One click. I've got one click on my phone. It's not a good idea as a rule, not this time of year. The thing that people, particularly people in my practice, when I work with them, the thing that I have observed is that these techniques are not selective. They don't just disrupt the terrible habits. They disrupt coping and soothing too. And people can find themselves really unsettled after good practice, where they have felt the breath, because somehow they have lost this comforting wash that they have engaged in so continuously, and they don't even know it's happening. The way of thinking about the particular good thing, the particular relationship in the past that was soothing and rewarding, and those kinds of things that we do in order to keep ourselves feeling okay, that also gets disrupted by when the technique is used accurately. When the technique is used without precision, when it's not used well, you can just sit for 15 minutes and be wildly neurotic, and sit still and just, drive yourself nuts and do the thing that you normally do, but just do it quietly without a break. That's also not good. But even when the technique is used with real precision, it can end up with quite the opposite of calm and quite the opposite of, comfortable. And part of the reason why this practice and this path was originally developed and presented by the Buddha years ago as something that was done in community and something that was done with people watching and teaching and observing people who are practicing and hearing what they have to say, is that this is not so foolproof. There's plenty of ways that this can turn into a very uncomfortable experience that then, this doesn't work for me, I'm not going to do this again, forget it. I'm just going to, go to the gym more and do it that way, somehow or other. I'm going to pick some other way of doing it. So it isn't so straightforward that, you sit, feel your breath, you will feel calm and you will feel more comfortable. Often that happens, but it isn't the primary result. The primary result is something else, quite different. It doesn't have anything to do with my ideas of what comfortable is or my ideas about what calm is. It actually is unknown to me. And as I practice, what I do is I discover something, a way of being in the world that is fresh and that I have not predicted and that I am not able to predict. And that really is the nature of it. That is, and it has a spacious quality that has room for all of this variations to take place. There's room for thinking, there's room for habits, there's room for obsessive thoughts, there's room for the breath, there's room for sitting, feeling my seat, there's room for hearing what the teacher is saying. There's room for all of that to happen. It does not have to be a tight, selective experience of excluding all of the bad things and only taking the good things. That kind of choice-making tends to be, it only leaves you with less. It always leaves you with a smaller experience and a smaller life. So I think that's enough for now. Let's hear from you guys and any questions or comments you have on what I've been talking about. There's a few more things I can say, but it's better to have it just come from in response to what you have to say. Okay. Sure.
Definitely.
Do you want a mic? Do we have a mic?
Yes.
Would you come and grab it?
Yeah.
That'll be quicker.
No, yeah.
That was good. It works good.
So that was great. I really value hearing this process described so clearly, especially in the talk before, but also afterwards. But I'm reminded about there's all this in your talk. There's all this so much mention of the word calm and soothing, and I don't think that you were implying that that's a universal goal. It's a very popular goal.
Yeah.
But I'm reminded while you were talking about a conversation I both witnessed and recorded. It was a conversation years ago between Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell. And Bill Moyers said to Joseph Campbell, so it's what people are seeking meaning, right? And Joseph Campbell said, no, they're not. What they're seeking is an experience of being alive. And that, to this day, it was like a bomb went off. It was like, that is something I identify with. And, there are, talking about calm, there's like these images of calm. And we live in a world where, like, all the pharmaceutical companies are providing all this soporific, calming stuff and pain killing. It's beyond belief how it's mushroomed, but that isn't the only way of life. There are people who cannot experience any kind of inner calm until they find a way to live that involves making a decision and then adopting whatever practice is necessary in order to take that decision into the world. And so, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, like in my own practice with Buddhism, for a long time, I failed to hear. I wasn't exposed to a voice that started filling in the blanks about why to meditate. Or, like, I heard how to meditate, but what was missing were the antidote to a lot of things that had been going on in my life, that had been, what goes in here, in your head, is so powerful. And it wasn't really until I started to hear somebody say, you're good, you're inherently good, your intelligence is inherent. And that, techniques like being, actually consciously pursuing warm-heartedness about this very process that we're talking about now, which is underlying everything you have to say. Warm-heartedness is how to get from this scrunched up view of the moment into, a phrase I've heard about it is softening your gaze. I think John actually has used that phrase, just softening your gaze. In my life, I come in contact with lots of people who are, struggling with drug addiction. And one of the things that I see so clearly is that they have taken from society a profound identification with their resumes. Their resume is who they are. And in the case of like a drug addict, that's bad. That's really bad. But it's actually bad for everybody. It's a terrible way to live. And like making that switch from that identification from your resume to your identification with the Milky Way, that you're part of this. You're not a freak. Nobody is a freak. Nobody is inherently broken. We're correct. This process of meditation, as we're practicing it, as you describe it, it helps with that. But I needed to hear those ideas. I needed to hear those ideas in order to give this business of, meditation could conceivably be practiced in the most sterile way imaginable. Of course people are going to want to use it as a substitute for value. Mm-hmm. Of course they are. Mm-hmm. Until they actually begin to realize that they don't need value. Mm-hmm. They have everything that they need. And that the way that they react to the world, that there's nothing wrong with it. If they let it happen. And they learn to let it happen. It's not necessarily easy. Mm-hmm. It means going into the forest in some place where there is no path. Mm-hmm. It's completely individualistic. There's just no way around that. You're going to pick up that lightsaber and make a mess of it. Mm-hmm. Even though that you have high goals and you really want to do the right thing, you're going to make a mess of it.
And describing the process is a tricky matter. It's, because pointing out what the goal is counterproductive. The closest I came to it in my talk was to talk about freshness and the unknown. This is new, unpredicted, it's fresh. That's if someone can be oriented in that direction, the rest of it takes care of itself. Because language does not do any good much after that. The talking is only to get you to practice with some precision and to keep at it, to support you while you're going through all of this untangling, And even untangling isn't really the right word, because the tangle can be just left aside. Nothing has to be unknotted necessarily. Just like you don't have to care about the knot. There's plenty of room for the knot also in the fresh experience of the moment. So you pointing out a particular point that I was trying to make is that when you name calmness as the goal, or you name that you want to be more comfortable as the goal, you're getting in the way of progress, because you've called it, and you've called it something, you've given it an idea, it has all these associations, and then you try to fabricate it. You try to do the thing that makes you calm, you try to do the thing that makes you comfortable. Or, notice that you feel a little comfortable, and then you do it again. You feel, oh, what was that? How did that work? The way that it happens with meditation sometimes, where you're sitting and you're saying, oh, last week it was much better. This one is not so good. I felt like, what was I doing last week? I want to do that now. I want to fabricate this sense of unconditioned freshness, which is ridiculous. You can't fabricate that. That's the whole point. Anything that's fabricated is not unconditioned and fresh. So the challenge of this kind of communication is to sort of provide a method that allows an exposure to the freshness without giving you a illustrated guide. I want to give an illustrated guide to the neuroses so that they aren't so bewildering, and so that you can just say, yeah, okay, there it is. That's again. I'm doing that again.